We are entrusting the day and the endeavor to the Lord. Let's go. Welcome to my channel where I visit many good books that live in the Bible. My name is Sarah Christine, and today I would like to talk about The Sunset Limited by Cormac McCarthy. I picked this up for a grad school class on faith, doubt, and redemption in literature, having never read any Cormac McCarthy before, and I was just floored. Brief summary of The Sunset Limited. This novel is basically a platonic dialogue between a black ex-con and a white professor that takes place after Black stops White from throwing himself in front of the Sunset Limited, which is a train. But like Mr. Incredible discovered in that wonderful movie, The Incredibles, there is such a thing as saving a man who does not want to be saved.
In a stunning turn of events, a superhero is being sued for saving someone who apparently didn't want to be saved.
That's White in this case. And Black has to basically barricade them both inside of his apartment with an array of locks and his person to keep White from, again, throwing himself in front of a train. And while Black is holding White hostage to life, they end up having a conversation that spans a lot. They cover how White became disillusioned with life and how Black came to faith after, when he was in prison, he was shanked, and how these distinct experiences have led them to wildly different conclusions about not only what is best for them, but what is best for all men. For Black, what's best is helping people in trouble in places where good is needed. But White says that that is, on page 128, a trick bag of communal misery wherein one finds salvation by consorting among the loathsome. Yeah, for White, the best thing for all mankind is to step in front of moving headlights. And Black does his best to convince him otherwise. He's very much like Moses in Deuteronomy 30:19. I set before you blessing and cursing, life and death. So choose life. But White is like, nah, I'ma choose death. That said, the end of Sunset Limited is ambiguous. We don't actually know what happens. There's lots of room for speculation. But today, what I would like to talk about is 3 things that set and or keep us on the path to death, to the Sunset Limited, as seen in the Sunset Limited, before offering what I think, and I think Black would agree, is the first step to a better alternative. The first thing that'll set us on the path to death is the desire for peacefulness. And I know that sounds weird, but stick with me. On page 135, White has had enough, and he lets Black have the full whammy of his worldview and tells him, Reverend, I yearned for the darkness. I pray for death, real death. If I thought that in death I would meet the people I've known in life, I don't know what I'd do. That would be the ultimate horror, the ultimate despair. If I had to meet my mother again and start all of that all over, only this time without the prospect of death to look forward to, well, that would be the final nightmare. Kafka on wheels. And Black says, damn, Professor, you don't want to see your own mama? And White says, no, I don't. I told you this would upset you. I want the dead to be dead forever, and I want to be one of them. Except that, of course, you can't be one of them. You can't be one of the dead, because what has no existence can have no community. No community. My heart warms just thinking about it. Silence, blackness, aloneness, peace, and all of that only a heartbeat away. As we see there, what White wants is total peace. Peace, silence, blackness, aloneness. And even if I don't agree with White, I get it, because I have seen Kung Fu Panda, and at the end of that film, there's a scene where Master Shifu is lying down, he's talking to Po, and he's like, you have brought peace to the valley, and also to me.
You have brought peace to this valley, and to me.
Master Shifu is clearly at peace, both externally in the valley and internally, but it only lasts a second, because very shortly, Po makes that sense of peace go.
No. Master! No, no, no! Don't die, Shifu, please!
I'm not dying, you idiot! Dragon, warrior.
And that's the thing, peace is very easily disturbed from without, which is why when you ask people, and I have done this exercise, to close their eyes and to think of something peaceful, they'll tell you like, the beach of an island, or an ice-capped mountain, or a cabin in the woods. And what all three of those things have in common is no people. They're just poof, gone. And I think we do that because, like White, we think, even if we wouldn't say it quite like he does, that other people are disturbances. They are wreckers of silence and solitude, thieves of peace. It's like, for us to maintain our tranquility, they need to just leave. However, other people aren't the only things that can disturb our peace. Say you're on that island on a mountain or in that cabin in the woods, you probably still won't have peace, because even if no one is bugging you, you're gonna want things and they're probably gonna be out of reach. That's actually a core teaching of Buddhism, and I'm not a Buddhist, but I think they have a reasonably accurate diagnosis of what can cause a lack of inner peace, because what they say is the core of suffering is wanting things or being attached to them, because listen, you may never get what you want, and that's gonna cause some angst, and even if you get it, you're gonna know that you're gonna lose it in the end.
I'm losing everything I ever cared about!
Which again, more angstiness. So yeah, even if no one else is bugging you, wanting or getting attached to things will wreck your peacefulness. The trick then, as Buddhists understand it, to achieving inner peace is to not want anything and not get attached, to extinguish both impulses. In fact, the culmination of Buddhism, nirvana, which means quenching, is not unlike White's vision of universal blackness, because what is meant by nirvana is the sea of human candles, each one a flickering flame, gets whoosh, blown out in the end. Suffice to say, I do not agree with either White's or Buddhism's conception of peace. And if you want my notion of peace, I would point you to the review I did of Kazuo Ishiguro's The Buried Giant, where I go into it, because the peace that White and Buddhism provide, I would honestly describe as blackout peace. It's obliteratory, and I think it will set you on the path to death. I mean, a desire for blackout peace certainly put White in front of the Sunset Limited. Not only out of desire though, also out of conviction, which brings me to the second thing that I want to talk about that sets us and keeps us on the path to death, and that is fallen fideliousness. It was the late, great philosopher Iris Murdoch who said in her book, The Sovereignty of Good, that a moral philosophy should be inhabited, which is basically a fancy way of saying you gotta put your money where your mouth is. You gotta walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And with White, on page 27, he tells Black, maybe I have no beliefs. I believe in the Sunset Limited. And he is clearly willing to put his money where his mouth is, to walk the walk, not just talk the talk, and to inhabit that moral philosophy, in the words of Iris Murdoch. If we want to reach even further back, James 2:22 says, we see that Abraham's faith was active together with his works, and by his works, faith was made complete. Abraham was willing to do the deeds to complete the creed. By his works, his faith was made complete. And similarly, White's work, stepping out in front of the Sunset Limited, the only thing in which he claimed to believe was how his faith was made complete. I'll be so real with you. White honestly reminded me a bit of Eddie, the Glyptodon, in the opening credits of the movie Ice Age, because when all the other animals are in the foreground marching, like prepare for the Ice Age, you see Eddie in the background. And there's a couple of his Glyptodon friends in the front saying like, where's Eddie?
Where's Eddie? He said something about being on the verge of an evolutionary breakthrough.
And Eddie is on top of a cliff, charging towards the precipice like, I'm flying, I'm flying.
Breakthrough.
Yeah, the reason Eddie reminds me of White is I think they're both wrong-headed, but they're both committed. As someone close to me, who I will call the water buffalo, would say, White is committed to the bit. He's not gonna chicken out or flinch. Just like Eddie believes he can fly, White believes in the Sunset Limited. He believes, therefore he acts, even if, like Eddie, it ends in a crash. Both White and Eddie are faithful, fidelious to a fault. Indeed, they are faithful to a fall. Though to be fair, Eddie's leap was born more of wishful thinking, whereas White would say, indeed does say on page 120, that my own reasons for jumping center around a gradual loss of make-believe. That's all, a gradual enlightenment as to the nature of reality. In either case, neither White nor Eddie will be dissuaded, though White is clearly the more jaded. In fact, in that respect, he reminded me a bit of a pre-Jesus Augustine, who wrote in the second book of his Confessions that, at the time, I had no motive for my wickedness except wickedness itself. It was foul, and I loved it. I loved the self-destruction. I loved my fall, not the object for which I had fallen, but my fall itself. As far as I could tell, White loves the fall itself, and I think a big part of the reason why is that he, White, gets to be at the helm. Black actually says as much to White on page 97 when he tells him straight up, "You on a road that you laid, and that fact alone might be all the reason you need for keeping to it." I don't know about you, but I get the sense that even if Black were able to prove to White that the path he has laid for himself is errant, I don't think White would be dissuaded. The pleas that Black is constantly giving to, like the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 18:32 says, to turn, to repent, and live, they do not move White a bit. Which is in part, I suspect, to do with what John Milton noted in Paradise Lost, that there are those who would rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. They'd rather fall than accept correction. Which brings me to the third and final thing that I think we see in the Sunset Limited will set and keep you on the path of death. And that is pridefulness. On page 126, Black asks White, "Suppose you could wake up tomorrow and you wouldn't be wanting to jump in front of no train. Suppose all you had to do was ask. Would you do it?" White, "It would depend on what I had to give up." And what must White give up? Well, Black clocked it from the get. He's like, you have to give up your hatred of other men. And he tells him on page 121, you must love your brother or die. Something which White is not willing to do because, as again, Black perspicuously pointed out on page 115, White sees other people from, quote, a certain height. White will grudgingly admit that other men are like him in that they're also in the pit of existence, but he would say, yeah, well, they're deluded. I have seen the light. But Black calls him on that. He's like, bro, what you have seen is the darkness. On page 118, Black tells White, I keep looking for ways to say it again. The light is all around you, except you don't see nothing but shadow. And the shadow is you. You the one making it. I'd agree with that assessment, and it's no surprise to me that a man like White, who is looking down on everyone from a certain height, casting shadows, is full of pride because he thinks he is the baddest cat in the sky. Or the pit, as it were, which I'm pulling from James Cameron's Avatar movie towards the end when Jake Sully, in the run-up to the big conflict, is trying to figure out a way to wrangle the giant alien dragon Taruk into doing his bidding. And finally, Jake comes up with a plan. He's like, oh, I'll fly from above because Taruk, this big dragon, he was, quote, the baddest cat in the sky. So why would he ever look up?
The way I had it figured, Taruk is the baddest cat in the sky, so why would he ever look up?
White, like Taruk, is used to always casting shadows, used to never looking up, used to feeling like he is the one who is always on top, i.e., he's prideful. And Proverbs 16:18 tells us that pride cometh before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. So it is really no surprise that White is ready to take a tumble. I mean, it's biblical. And you know what else is biblical and highly relevant to the story of Sunset Limited and the dichotomy between Black and White in particular? Proverbs 26:12, where we are told, do you see a person wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him. If White is the person that is wise in his own eyes, Black is the fool with more hope than him. We see this on page 106 when Black makes probably his strongest appeal for White to desist. And Black says, a lot of things is beyond my understanding. I know that. I say it again. If it ain't in this book, the Bible, then there's a good chance that I don't know it. Before I started reading the Bible, I was pretty dumb. But I wasn't dumb enough to believe that what had got me nowheres in 40 years was all of a sudden gonna get me somewheres. I was dumb, but I wasn't that dumb. I seen what was there for the asking, and I decided to ask. And that's all I done. And it was hard. I'll tell you right now, Professor, it was hard. I was laying there all cut up and chained to that hospital bed, and I was crying. I hurt so bad, and I thought they'd kill me if I did live. And I tried to say it, and tried to say it. And after a while, I just quit. I put all of that away from me, and I just said it. I said, please help me. And he did. That right there is the first step to a better alternative than death, than the Sunset Limited. It is a willingness when you're flat on your back in humbled condition to ask for help from the one who is willing and able to give, Jesus. And as Black tells White just 2 pages later, you don't have to be virtuous to ask for help from Jesus. Quote, you don't have to be virtuous. You just has to be quiet. I can't speak for the Lord, but the experience I've had leads me to believe that he'll speak to anybody that'll listen. Black is 100% correct. You do not have to be virtuous to ask for help from Jesus. Trust me, I was 15 years an addict before I came to Jesus. You do not have to be virtuous, but you do have to be willing to listen. It's like we were told in James 1:19 through 21, you have to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger, because human anger does not accomplish the righteousness of God. Therefore, ridding yourself of all evil and fell that is so prevalent, humbly receive the implanted word, which is able to save your soul. We see from that chain that what begins with a quick willingness to listen leads ultimately to the salvation of your soul. So, if you find yourself like White, a total misanthrope, wanting to black out the world, committed to throwing yourself off a cliff or in front of a Sunset Limited and looking down on everybody else in the pit, I would encourage you to make a shift, to be quick to listen and to turn and live. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this was edifying, encouraging, and entertaining, and I hope you will continue to join me as I visit many good books that live in the Bible. I have to go have a voice lesson now. So this is a great warm-up. Be like, I would like to talk about, what even is this book called? Sunset Limited by Cormac McCarthy.